Well, hello. I'm here now. Good evening. Hope you're all having a good night. And I hope you've had a good day. As for me, once again, another busy and rough day. But you know what? It's time to make that better. Together. Oh man, today has been interesting to say the least. Probably one of the highlights of today was looking at a bunch of really gorgeous houses. It's just a habit my coworkers and I have picked up to just randomly look up houses on Zillow, sorted by the most expensive kind, and then just picking a state, finding any sort of building that looks interesting. And it's been fun. It's been great. We've found some absolutely gorgeous and breathtaking places. And we have found some very, very odd things as well. Rich in dollars, poor in cents. Or at least taste. Like, there was one that was basically an apartment along the East Coast. It might have been in New York. And while looking, well, for some reason, they made a room that is entirely blue. And I'm not talking just your standard blue. Like, it was a deep, dark blue. But it was everything in that room. And it looked sickening. Oh, we clicked away so fast. Everything else was just all black or all white. But the blue room haunts us to this day. Other houses, of course, have been much, much better. In fact, we even found some hobbit houses and castles. You wouldn't think that the United States of America had full-blown castles, but you would be wrong. They're spread out here and there across the country, but they're very, very nice. Ah, man. What I would do if I were to own a castle. It would let me call you princess, that's for sure. As I reign over, king of the land. Ah, silly. Well, I hope that you've all eaten at least something throughout the day, and that you've had plenty of water. Staying hydrated is important after all. And with that said, we'll go ahead and start reading chapter 7. We're about a good third through the book now, which surprises me, honestly. Wasn't sure how much the movie adapted the book, but I know for sure that this next part was not in the movie. As now we're in the house of Tom Bombadil. The four hobbits stepped over the wide stone threshold and stood still, blinking. They were in a long, low room, filled with the light of lamps swinging from the beams of the roof. and on the table of dark polished wood stood many candles, tall and yellow, burning brightly. In a chair at the far side of the room, facing the other door, sat a woman. Her long yellow hair rippled down her shoulders. Her gown was green, green as young reeds, shot with silver like beads of dew. And her belt was of gold, shaped like a chain of flag lilies, set with the pale blue eyes of forget me nots. About her feet, in wide vessels of green and brown earthenware, white water lilies were floating, so that she seemed to be enthroned in the midst of a pool. Enter, good guests, she said, and as she spoke, they knew that it was her clear voice they heard singing. They came a few timid steps further into the room and began to bow low, feeling strangely surprised and awkward, like folk that, knocking at a cottage door to beg for a drink of water, have been answered by a fair young elf queen, clad in living flowers. But before they could say anything, she sprang up lightly, up and over the lily bowls, and ran laughing towards them. And as she ran, her gown rustled softly, like the wind in the flowering borders of a river. Come, dear folk, she said, taking Frodo by the hand. Laugh and be merry. I am Goldberry, daughter of the river. Then lightly she passed them, and closing the door, she turned her back to it, with her white arms spread out across it. Let us shut out the night, she said, for you are still afraid, perhaps, of mist and tree, shadows and deep water, and untamed things. Fear nothing, for tonight you are under the roof of Tom Bombadil. The hobbits looked at her in wonder, and she looked at each of them and smiled. Fair Lady Goldberry, said Frodo at last, feeling his heart moved with a joy that he did not understand. He stood as he had at times stood enchanted by fair elfin voices, but the spell that was now laid upon him was different. Less keen and lofty was the delight, but deeper, nearer to the mortal heart, marvelous, yet not strange. Fair Lady Goldberry, he said again, now the joy that was hidden in the songs we heard is made plain to me. O slender as a willow wand, O clear than clear water, O reed by the living pool, fair river daughter. O springtime and summertime and spring again after, O wind on the waterfall and at the leaves' laughter. Suddenly, he stopped and stammered, overcome with surprise to hear himself saying such things. But Goldberry laughed. Welcome, she said. I had not heard that folk in the Shire were so sweet-tongued, but I see that you are an elf friend. The light in your eyes and the ring in your voice tells it. This is a merry meeting. Sit now, and wait for the master of the house. He will not be long. He is tending your tired beasts. The hobbits sat down gladly in the low rush-seated chairs, while Goldberry busied herself around the table. And their eyes followed her, for the slender grace of her movement filled them with quiet delight. From somewhere behind the house came the sound of singing. Every now and then, they caught among many a derry-dole and merry-dole, and a ring-a-ding-dillo the repeated words. Old Tom Bombadil is a merry fellow, bright blue his jacket is, and his boots are yellow. Fair lady, Frodo said again after a while, tell me if my asking does not seem foolish. Who is Tom Bombadil? He is, said Goldberry, staying her swift movement and smiling. Frodo looked at her questioningly. He is as you have seen him, she said in answer to his look. He is the master of wood, water, and hill. And all this strange land belongs to him? No, indeed, she answered, and her smile faded. That would indeed be a burden, she added in a low voice, as if to herself. The trees and the grasses and all things growing or living in the land belong each to themselves. Tom Bombadil is the master. No one has ever caught old Tom walking in the forest, wading in the water, leaping on the hilltops under light and shadow. He has no fear. Tom Bombadil is master. A door opened and in came Tom Bombadil. He had now no hat, and his thick brown hair was crowned with autumn leaves. He laughed, and going to Goldberry, took her hand. Here's my pretty lady, he said, bowing to the hobbits. Here's my Goldberry, clothed in all silver green, with flowers in her girdle. Is the table laden? Icy yellow cream and honeycomb, and white bread and butter, milk, cheese, and green herbs, and ripe berries gathered. Is that enough for us? Is the supper ready? It is, said Goldberry, but the guests perhaps are not. Tom clapped his hands and cried, Tom, Tom, your guests are tired, and you had near forgotten. Come now, my merry friends, and Tom will refresh you. You shall clean grimy hands and wash your weary faces, cast off your muddy cloaks and comb out your tangles. He opened the door, and they followed him down a short passage and round a sharp turn. They came into a low room with a sloping roof, a penthouse it seemed, built on to the north end of the house. Its walls were of clean stone, but they were mostly covered with green hanging mats and yellow curtains. The floor was flagged and strewn with fresh green rushes. There were 4 deep mattresses, each piled with white blankets. Laid on the floor, along one side, against the opposite wall, was a long bench laden with wide earthenware basins, and beside it stood brown ewers, filled with water, some cold, some steaming hot. There were soft green slippers set ready beside each bed. You know, one of the things we see inside of those various houses we would check out, like planning for the future and whatnot. But sometimes you see some luxurious bathrooms in there, like opulent baths, long copper tubs, ready to be filled to the brim and just soak in and enjoy. Personally, I prefer warm water, and of course going to hot. Cold water just sorta takes it out of me, you know? I keep talking about it, but the greatest water I've ever felt is still that beach in Puerto Peñasco, Mexico. Staying at that resort was phenomenal, and I had never experienced ocean water being that warm before. If I could be anywhere, to be along those beach sides together with you. Just warm air, warm waters, like a bath, gorgeous views. But am I referring to the sunsets? Or you? Before long, washed and refreshed, The hobbits were seated at the table, two on each side, while at either end sat Goldberry and the master. It was a long and merry meal. Though the hobbits ate, as only famished hobbits can eat, there was no lack. The drink in their drinking bowls seemed to be clear cold water, yet it went to their hearts like wine and set free their voices. Their guests became suddenly aware that they were singing merrily, as if it was easier and more natural than talking. Honestly, sometimes that is really a mood. Sometimes you just sing a little tune and it sounds so nice, rather than just saying a plain sentence. Sing it out, have some fun. At last, Tom and Goldberry rose and cleared the table swiftly. The guests were commanded to sit quiet and were set in chairs, each with a footstool to his tired feet. There was a fire in the wide hearth before them, and it was burning with a sweet smell as if it were built of apple wood. When everything was set in order, all the lights in the room were put out, except one lamp and a pair of candles at the end of a chimney shelf. Then Goldberry came and stood before them, holding a candle, and she wished them each a good night and deep sleep. Have peace now, she said, until the morning. Heed no nightly noises, for nothing passes the doors and windows here at moonlight and starlight, and the wind off the hilltop. At night, she passed out of the room with a glimmer and a rustle. The sound of her footsteps was like a stream falling gently away downhill over cool stones in the quiet of night. Tom sat on a while beside them in silence, while each of them tried to muster the courage to ask one of the many questions he had meant to ask at supper. Sleep gathered on their eyelids. At last, Frodo spoke. "Do you hear me calling, Master? Or was it just chance that brought you at that moment?" Tom stirred like a man shaken out of a pleasant dream. What?" said he. "Did I hear you calling?" "Nay, I did not hear. I was busy singing. Just chance brought me then, if chance you call it. It was no plan of mine, though I was waiting for you. We heard news of you, and learned that you were wandering. We guessed you would come here ere long, down to the water. All paths lead that way, down to Withywindle. Old Grey Willow Man, he's a mighty singer, and it's hard for the little folk to escape his cunning mazes. But Tom had an errand to hit there that he dared not hinder." Tom nodded as if in sleep was taking him again, but he went on in a soft singing voice. "I had an errand there, gathering water lilies, green leaves and lilies white, to please my pretty lady. The last ere the year's end, to keep them from the winter, to flower her pretty feet till the snows are melted. Each year at summer's end, I go to find them for her, in a wide pool, deep and clear, far down Withywindle." Core. "There they open first in spring, and there they linger latest. By that pool long ago, I found the river daughter. There young Goldberry is sitting in the rushes. Sweet was her singing then, and her heart was beating." Good to see you, Core. Am I your favorite streamer? Wow. That's a huge honor, actually. How are you doing tonight? How was your day? Settle on in. Started. Aw, you're always such a sweetheart. Your day is meh. Oh, I'm sorry. Let's go ahead and make it better together, shall we? He opened his eyes and looked at them with a sudden glint of blue. And that proved well for you, for now I shall no longer go down deep again along the forest water, not while the year is old, nor shall I be passing Old Man Willow's house this side of springtime, not till the merry spring, where the river daughter dances down the withy path to bathe in the water. He fell silent again, but Frodo could not help asking one more question, the one he most desired to have answered. "Tell us, master," he said, "about the Willow Man. What is he? I have never heard of him before." "No, don't," said Merry and Pippin together, sitting suddenly upright. "Not now. Not until the morning." "That is right," said the old man. "Now is the time for resting. Some things are ill to hear when the world's in shadow. Sleep till the morning light, rest on the pillow. Heed no mighty noise, fear no gray willow." And with that, he took down the lamp and blew it out, and grasping a candle in either hand, he led them out of the room. Their mattresses and pillows were soft as down, and the blankets were of white's wool. They had hardly laid themselves on the deep beds and drawn the light covers over them before they were asleep. Man, I can't wait to fall asleep like that one day. I do have to admit, sometimes falling asleep can be a bit of a challenge. I don't know if I would call it pure insomnia, but it does take a good deal of time. Hilariously, though, I at least have been able to provide services, I guess I could say, to people and friends that really, really need to sleep. It all works out, you know? Read a passage here, tell a story there. And next thing you know, that's one person snoring in call, or multiple. But who will provide me said services? Bar of Dream. Would that such a service could be provided to me. But that is okay. There will be no one watching the watchman this time. Just as a forever DM guides others through the worlds. Elcor, I look forward to your visit then. In the dead night, Frodo lay in a dream without light. Then he saw a young moon rising. Under its thin light, there loomed before him a black wall of rock, pierced by a dark arch like a great gate. Bring the humidifier and blankies now. Ah. Such comfort. It seemed to Frodo that he was lifted up, and passing over, he saw that the rock wall was a circle of hills, and that within it was a plain, and in the midst of the plain stood a pinnacle of stone. It is good to sleep with moist air. I do find that it gets very, very dry around here once winter kicks in. It's also very, very dry when it's summer, too. There is no winning here. The weather's just too extreme. But right now is nice. Right now is perfect. And in the midst of the plain stood a pinnacle of stone, like a vast tower, but not made by hands. That's why it's good to have the humidifier all year round. That makes sense. That makes sense. I should look into that. Instead of all the fans that I have around here. On its top stood the figure of a man, and glistened in his white hair as the wind stirred it. Up from the... What if you were me? Okay. The moon as it rose seemed to hang for a moment above his head and glisten in his white hair as the wind stirred it. Up from the dark plain below came the crying of fell voices and the howling of many wolves. Suddenly, a shadow, like the shape of great wings, passed over the moon. The figure lifted his arms, and a light flashed from the staff that he wielded. A mighty eagle swept down and bore him away. The voices wailed, and the wolves yammered. There was a noise like a strong wind blowing, and on it was borne the sound of hooves galloping, galloping, galloping from the east. Black riders, thought Frodo as he wakened, with the sound of the hooves still echoing in his mind. He wondered if he would ever have the courage to leave the safety of those stone walls. He lay motionless, still listening, but all was now silent, and at last he turned and fell asleep again, or wandered into some other unremembered dream. I do enjoy doing that. You ever just wake up from a dream and just think, I don't want to be awake right now. I want to go back. And then you just go right back to sleep. Oh, I love doing that. I wish I could do it more these days. Oh well. The real dream is being here with you. So it's good to be awake. It's true. I do like it when the dream actually continues. At his side, Pippin lay dreaming pleasantly, but a change came over his dreams, and he turned and groaned. Suddenly, he woke, or thought he had waked, and yet still heard in the darkness the sound that had disturbed his dreams. Tap, squeak. The noise was like branches fretting in the wind, twig fingers scraping, wall and window. He wondered if there were willow trees close to the house, and then suddenly he had a dreadful feeling that he was not in an ordinary house at all, but inside the willow, listening to that horrible dry creaking voice laughing at him again. He sat up and felt the soft pillows yield to his hands, and he lay down again relieved. He seemed to hear the echo of words in his ears. Fear nothing. Have peace until the morning. Heed no nightly noises. Then he went to sleep again. It was the sound of water that Mary heard falling into his quiet sleep. The water streaming down gently, and then spreading irresistibly all around the house into a dark shoreless pool. It gurgled under the walls and was rising slowly but surely. I shall be drowned, he thought. It will find its way in, and then I shall drown. He felt that he was lying in a soft, slimy bog, and springing up, he set his foot on the corner of a cold, hard flagstone. Then he remembered where he was and lay down again. He seemed to hear or remember hearing nothing passes doors or windows save moonlight and starlight and the wind off the hilltop. A little breath of sweet air moved the curtain. He breathed deep and fell asleep again. As far as he could remember, Sam slept through the night in deep content, if logs are contented. Ever have that one friend that no matter what can always just fall asleep, and they are dead asleep? I'm too light of a sleeper. But I remember going camping with one of my best friends, and we would always be in the tent together. And I would always forget he snores. Snores up a storm, that one. So there I am, laying awake. The sound of rumbling thunder, crackling lightning, all throughout the night. Oh man. There are some snores I can sleep past, but unfortunately his are not that guy. Oh, I was up until like 2 or 3 in the morning when another camper came in and opened up the tent door and asked, "Hey, we're gonna start going out now to start climbing up the mountain. You guys coming?" He woke up and said, "Yeah." I said no, and then tried to fall asleep. Oh. He also woke up a few times too and said, "I feel something stabbing me in the back. I think there's a rock under my mattress." Turns out he was right. And then his mattress began deflating. So he would ask me to blow up his mattress again. And I did. Oh. So then he left to go climbing up the mountain. And I said, "You know what? My cot is very uncomfortable. Screw it." So I took the mattress. And sure enough, it was on a rock and deflating. I woke up tumbling over. Oh, it was rough. But everyone else had such a rougher day. Oh man, that was such a bad camping trip. But the views were gorgeous. You remember that picture I posted in the Discord in the art channel? That was from that trip. Like, that was our view. And then over to the left a bit was the lakeside close to us. Like, it was such a fantastic location. But the experience was so bad. People getting lost in directions, a car almost falling off the mountain, people taking wrong paths and walking for at least 10 miles more than necessary. The car wheels exploding, then the engine stopped working. Me, I just had bad sleep and got sunburned. Oh man. mean, at least I'll never forget it. Oh, also, we were originally supposed to stay inside of a cabin, but the one who planned the trip messed up so badly and couldn't actually get the key. So while we were allowed there, we weren't able to actually make it in there, which is why we had set up the tents afterwards. Oh, everything about that trip was just so bad. But it's okay. It's okay. It was an experience. I have not been camping since, but I would love to. I love going camping, setting up in nature, not being connected to any technology whatsoever. Enjoying the sights, the sounds, the smells. It's just so relaxing. One of those few places where I can just exist, but not really. Just enjoy nature. I love nature. Oh, yeah. And of course, others might go and take the time to hike around and go up to further places and explore, but me, I like to relax. Sit around the fire, maybe cook a bit, tell some stories, make some s'mores. The last camp experience before that was pretty good too. Oh, yeah, I love s'mores. Not that I should have them, but I like them a lot. Nice, ooey gooey marshmallow, the lightly melted chocolate on the graham cracker. Why not? Well, I'm allergic to processed sugar and chocolate. And gluten. It's kind of everything in one. Oh well, what can you do? Also allergic to pork and tree nuts, lactose intolerant. There's colorants as well. Not the chocolate, yeah. I'll still eat it though. But I shouldn't. Luckily, I already know my warning sign, which is if I eat a piece of chocolate and I sneeze, my body's saying that's enough. You've had done enough, pal. Yeah. But it's the life I live. And there's still plenty of good foods and sweet treats to enjoy. After all, you're here. They woke up all four at once in the morning light. Tom was moving about the room, whistling like a starling. When he heard them stir, he clapped his hands and cried, "Hey! Come, merry doll, my hearties." He drew back the yellow curtains, and the hobbits saw that these had covered the windows at either end of the room, one looking east and the other looking west. They leapt up refreshed. I'm right here. I'll save you. Frodo ran to the eastern window and found himself looking into a kitchen garden gray with dew. He had half expected to see turf right up to the walls, turf all pocked with hoofprints. Actually, his view was screened by a tall line of beams on poles, but above and far beyond them, the gray top of the hill loomed up against the sunrise. It was a pale morning in the east. Behind long clouds of lines of soiled wool stained red at the edges lay glimmering deeps of yellow. The sky spoke of rain to come, but the light was broadening quickly, and the red flowers on the beans began to glow against the wet green leaves. Pippin looked out of the western window, down into a pool of mist. The forest was hidden under a fog. It was like looking down onto a sloping cloud roof from above. It was a fold or channel where the mist was broken into many plumes and billows. The valley of the Withy Windle. The stream ran down the hill on the left and vanished into the white shadows. Near at hand was a flower garden and a clip hedge, silver netted, and beyond that, gray shaven grass pale with dewdrops. There was no willow tree to be seen. "Good morning, merry friends," cried Tom, opening the eastern window wide. Cool air flowed in. It had a rainy smell. "Sun won't show her face much today, I'm thinking. I have been walking wide, leaping on the hilltops, since the gray dawn began, nosing wind and weather, wet grass underfoot, wet sky above me. I waken Goldberry singing under window, but not wakes hobbit folk in the early morning. In the night, little folk wake up in the darkness and sleep after light is come. Ring-a-ding-dillo. Wake now, my merry friends. Forget the mighty nightly noises. Ring-a-ding-dillo-dell. Very dell me, my hearties. If you come soon, you'll find breakfast on the table. If you come late, you'll get grass and rainwater." Needless to say, not that Tom's threat sounded very serious, the hobbits came soon and left the table late, and only when it was beginning to look rather empty. Neither Tom nor Goldberry were there. Tom could be heard about the house, clattering in the kitchen and up and down the stairs, and singing here and there outside. Broom looked westward over the mist-clouded valley, and the window was open. Water dripped down from thatched eaves above. That's right. No more bed. Gotta have the good food. But you know what'd be even better? Breakfast in bed. Served by me, of course. Before they had finished breakfast, the clouds had joined into an unbroken roof, and a straight gray rain came softly and steadily down. Behind its deep curtain, the forest was completely veiled. As they looked out of the window, there came falling gently, as if it were flowing down the rain out of the sky, the clear voice of Goldberry, singing up above them. They could hear a few words, but it seemed plain to them that the song was a rain song, as sweet as the showers on the dry hills that told the tales of rivers, front of the spring in the highlands to the sea far below. The hobbits listened with delight, and Frodo was glad in his heart and blessed the kindly weather because it delayed them from departing. The thought of going had been heavy upon him from the moment he awoke, but he guessed now that they would not go further that day. "Too bad you don't eat breakfast much, that is true. That is fair. Me, I love a good breakfast. And there's so many different kinds, too, from all around the world." Let's see. Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to make a food channel for the server and post all my culinary creations. This cooking is fun. The best breakfast I made was a bed of lovely russet potatoes, seasoned of course. Then I made little divots where I each put an egg in them. Of course, salted and peppered a bit, covered under a layer of cheese and andouille sausage. Ah, such a good and hearty breakfast. And yeah, I cook. My favorite thing is Japanese curry, but I love a good carne asada. I'm still trying to get the hang of chicken katsu, but... Oh, you don't like eggs? That's interesting. I've met a few people that don't like them. That's fair. Oh, sausage and hash browns. Maybe a pancake to go with it, too. And there you go. Breakfast for kid-core genius. I think the texture really depends on how it's prepared. And also if you're using good eggs or not. That's also fair. You seem like a hash brown kind of person. Plus, who doesn't like hash browns, honestly? There are some, but I like them. The upper wind settled in the west, and deeper and wetter clouds rolled up to spill their laden rain on the bare heads of the downs. Nothing could be seen all around the house but falling water. Frodo stood near the open door and watched the white chalky path turn into a little river of milk and go bubbling away down into the valley. Tom Bombadil came trotting round the corner of the house, waving his arm as if he was warding off the rain. And indeed, where he sprang over the threshold he seemed quite dry, except for his boots. These he took off and put in the chimney corner. Then he sat in the largest chair and called the hobbits to gather round him. "This is Goldberry's washing day," he said, "and her autumn cleaning, too wet for hobbit folk. Them rest while they are able. It's a good day for long tales, for questions and for answers. So Tom will start the talking." Well, at least the man knows what the people want. What an interesting and merry fellow who did not make it to the movies. He told them many remarkable stories, sometimes half as if speaking to himself, sometimes looking at them suddenly with a bright blue eye under his deep brows. Jabe, I agree. Often his voice would turn to song, and he would get out of his chair and dance about. He told them tales of bees and flowers, the ways of trees and the strange creatures of the forest, about the evil things and good things, about things friendly and things unfriendly, cruel things and kind things, and secrets hidden under brambles. As they listened, they began to understand the lives of the forest, apart from themselves. Indeed, to feel themselves as the strangers where all the other things were at home. Moving constantly in and out of his talk was Old Man Willow, and Frodo learned now enough to content him. Indeed, more than enough, for it was not comfortable lore. Tom's words laid bare the heart of trees and their thoughts, which were often dark and strange, and filled with the hatred of things that go free upon the earth. Gnawing, fighting, breaking, hacking, burning, destroyers and usurpers. It was not called the Old Forest without reason, for it was indeed an ancient, a survivor of vast forgotten woods, and in it there lived yet, aging no quicker than the hills, the fathers of trees, remembering times when they were lords. The countless years had filled them with pride and rooted wisdom, and with malice. But none were more dangerous than the great willow. His heart was rotten, but his strength was green, and he was cunning, a master of winds, and his song and thought ran through the woods on both sides of the river. His gray, thirsty spirit drew power out of the earth and spread like fine root threads in the ground and invisible twig fingers in the air, till it had under its dominion nearly all the trees of the forest, from the hedge to the downs. That's a scary tree, honestly. That's horrifying. Suddenly, Tom's talk left the woods and went leaping up the young stream, over bubbling waterfalls, over pebbles and worn rocks, and among small flowers, in close grass and wet crannies, wandering at last up to the downs. They heard of the great barrows, and the green mounds, and the stone rings upon the hills, and in the hollows among the hills. Sheep were bleating in flocks, green walls where white walls rose. There were fortresses on the heights, kings of little kingdoms fought together, and the young sun shone like fire on the red metal of their new and greedy swords. There were victory and defeat. The towers fell, fortresses were burned, and flames went up into the sky. Gold was piled on the biers of dead kings and queens, and mounds covered them, and the stone doors were shut, and the grass grew over all. Sheep walked for a little while biting the grass, but soon the hills were empty again. A shadow came out of dark places far away. The bones were stirred in the mounds. Barrow wights walked in the hollow places of a cling of rings on cold fingers, and gold chains in the wind. Stone rings grinned out of the ground like broken teeth in the moonlight. The hobbits shuddered. Even in the Shire, the rumor of the Barrow Wights, of the Barrow Downs, beyond the forest had been heard. But it was not a tale that any hobbit liked to listen to, even by a comfortable fireside far away. These four now suddenly remembered what the joy of this house had driven from their minds. The house of Tom Bombadil nestled under the very shoulder of those dreaded hills. They lost the thread of his tale and shifted uneasily, looking aside at one another. Oh, you're having a good time listening to stories, and then you find out, hey, just so you know, you're right next to an ancient burial ground, and there are zombies. I told you not to stay awake. That's kind of messed up. Oh, man. Low key. It's kind of like when I'm telling a ghost story. And they throw in, like, yeah, no, that happened. Kinda sucked. And everyone's just like, kinda? What do you mean? I'm like, yeah, don't worry about it. And if I tell a story, there's a chance you might take something home. It's fine. See ya. based on a true story, or like based on a true story. Ah, all right. I am going to be right back. I drink some water, stretch a little bit, and then continue for until the chapter ends. Okay? Be right back. Snack too? But you're right here. Anyways. Slime ball, you say? Sorry, I found out I can do a very, very smug face. Hi, I'm back. I know it's not October anymore, but we all love a good jump scare. Reminds me of my old workplace. Thank you, Core. Basically, as we were going through, we of course weren't allowed to scare guests. That would defeat the point of being a museum, but we did have a spooky haunted building with many dark corners. We didn't say anything about scaring each other. Ah, and so, jump scares aplenty. Ah, those were good times. Turns out, I can move very, very quietly as well. So, pretty easy to just move into position and wait right behind somebody. Maybe saying something. Must have been so funny. Oh, definitely. I think the funniest jump scare that I performed, Cassian Spy. I am the spy. Gentlemen. I do have the suit already. But yeah, while being outside, I would get people ready for their tours by having them wait in line, setting up the groups, and making sure everybody had filled out their waivers, as you did need to fill out a waiver to go on the tour. That's just how it goes. But once it was time to bring your group inside to pay for your tickets, use the bathroom, and things of that nature, I would have to bring your group up to large, giant wooden doors. And these things are old and heavy. They were an absolute pain to open. And I found that usually I would have to turn the knob and swing that thing as hard as I could. And that would kind of make people jump in their own right. But then I thought, what if I could make it better? To my deepest, gruffest, loudest voice, I would rip the door off its hinges, basically kind of roaring at them, "Welcome to the museum." It scared so many people, and honestly, the owner loved it and said, "Yeah, no, keep doing that. That's great." But the best one happened one night, as it was going to be the final tour of the night. And there, with a group of 16 and 17-year-olds, was one Spanish mother. And let me tell you, what we were offering at the museum was everything that Spanish mothers hate with a passion. Oh, they do not like anything that has to do with spooky. But with a lot of talking, convincing, and puppy dog eyes, finally we all convinced her to go along for the ride, because if she didn't go, there would be no tour. Listen, I know how to sell. So I bring the group up to the door. I get the okay to bring them in. I explain the rules. I place my hand against the handle. And then a silence. "Welcome to the museum." Oh, she jumped back and screamed so loudly, going, "Ay, Dios mío." Oh, I could not stop laughing. The box office couldn't stop laughing. The security guard who was watching couldn't stop laughing. Oh, it was legendary. And they had a good tour. Do I miss it? Sometimes I do, but I'll never go back. But there were some very, very good memories. Why not? Well, it's kind of a pain to have to drive an hour to and from there. The hours were a bit painful, and normally in the positions that I would work, I would be one of the last people leaving, usually past midnight. It killed any semblance of a dating life. I really only had time for that job because I'd be tired otherwise. And while weekly pay is a wonderful, wonderful thing, it didn't necessarily pay a lot either. Tips were nice every now and then, though. But usually I wouldn't be in the places to get tips either. And after the first year and a half or so, the whole vibe of the museum changed, became more businesslike, and we really weren't a fan of how the tours themselves were done. But we loved the place, we kept it going. But little by little, more changes happened, and then COVID hit. So none of us were there anymore. Oh well. Fun turned corporate, that's exactly it. It seemed like a passion project that ended up becoming widely successful, and thus it grew out of it. Oh well. Again, I still had good times, and I was always in the know too. I don't know how, but when you're bros with the owner of the place, it happens, I guess. And I just think to myself, how did I get here? Oh well. Shruggamundo. Well, let's see. How much more is there to this chapter? Not much. Okay. Let's continue on then. I don't know why I was about to blow a kiss. Hope I grabbed that snack. I mean, where's your hand? Anyways, don't worry about it. When they caught his words again, they found that he had now wandered into strange regions beyond their memory and beyond their waking thought. Why, don't be sorry, it's okay. Into times when the world was wider and the seas flowed straight to the western shore, and still on and back, Tom went singing out into ancient starlight, and when only the elf sires were awake, then suddenly he stopped, and they saw that he nodded as if he was falling asleep. The hobbit sat still before him, enchanted, and it seemed as if, under the spell of his words, the wind had gone, the clouds had dried up, and the day had been withdrawn, and the darkness had come from east and west, and all the sky was filled with the light of white stars. Whether the morning and evening of one day or of many days had passed, Frodo could not tell. He did not feel either hungry or tired, only filled with wonder. The stars shone through the window, and the silence of the heavens seemed to be round him. He spoke at last, out of his wonder and sudden fear of that silence. "Who are you, master?" he asked. "And what?" said Tom, sitting up, and his eyes glinting in the gloom. "Don't you know my name yet? That's the only answer. Tell me, who are you, alone yourself and nameless? But you are young, and I am old. Eldest, that's what I am. Mark my words, my friends. Tom was here before the river and the trees. Tom remembers the first raindrop and the first acorn. He made paths before the big people and saw the little people arriving. He was here before the kings and the graves and the barrow wights. When the elves passed westward, Tom was here already, before the seas were bent. He knew the dark under the stars when it was fearless, before the Dark Lord came from outside. A shadow seemed to pass by the window, and the hobbits glanced hastily through the ancient panes. It's true. Man said, I was here since the very, very beginning. Which is crazy. Honestly, though, it does remind me of one of my favorite series that I would love to read. But it is also 12 books. But basically, in it, some of the main characters are two sorcerers that have basically been around for a long time. Like, the Aunt Polgara, she's at least like of several hundred years. But old Mr. Wolf, been there for countless thousands. And then, after the whole series of following the main protagonist, you get to actually hear their stories from their perspective of their journeys of growing up and going through the world. And I just think there's something really awesome and cool about that. This timeless, but still a human perspective. And you really get a sense of their style and personality. And they'll throw little tidbits to the whole series like, huh? See? I told you. I told you this certain character. As you watch ancient family lines form. Must read this book now? Okay. I'm down. But I am almost halfway through this one. Actually, you know, I did have this idea earlier today. I'm going to get a library background. And then we're going to have a sampler night. Reading various first chapters, or at least a few paragraphs in, of various different book series, different genres, and seeing what we want to listen to. I think that'd be a fun date. A good sampler platter. So we can have my favorite series there. We can put Fourth Wing on the line for the spicy books category. People love spice. People love dragons. Put them both together and what do you get? Fourth Wing. Oh boy, indeed. Although I do think for that one, I'd have to do a very, very bold ask, which is make it an 18 plus stream. Oh no. I don't want to let loose the demons though. Oh boy. So that one's a proceed with caution. Letting loose Pandora's box. Releasing the voices from Solar's head. It's true. Good thing indeed. We definitely a good read. I do know that like every single one of my coworkers is obsessed with Fourth Wing, so yeah, I could see it. I could see it catching on. Let's see. A shadow seemed to pass by the window, and the hobbits glanced hastily through the panes. When they turned again, Goldberry stood in the door behind, framed in light. She held a candle shielding its flame from the draught with her hand, and the light flowed through it like sunlight through a white shell. The rain has ended, she said, and new waters are running downhill under the stars. Let us now laugh and be glad. And let us have food and drink, cried Tom. Long tales are thirsty, and long listening's hungry work, morning, noon, and evening. With that, he jumped out of his chair, and with a bound, took a candle from the chimney shelf and lit it in the flame that Goldberry held. Then he danced about the table. Suddenly, he hopped through the door and disappeared. Quickly he returned, bearing a large and laden tray. Then Tom and Goldberry set the table, and the hobbits sat half in wonder and half in laughter. So fair was the grace of Goldberry, and so merry and odd the caperings of Tom. Yet in some fashion they seemed to weave a single dance, neither hindering the other, in and out of the room, and round about the table, and with great speed food and vessels and light were set in order. The boards blazed with candles white and yellow. Tom bowed to his guests. Supper is ready, said Goldberry, and now the hobbits saw that she was clothed all in silver with a white girdle, and her shoes were like fish's mail. But Tom was all in clean blue, blue as rain-washed forget-me-nots, and he had green stockings. It was a supper even better than before. The hobbits, under the spell of Tom's words, may have missed one meal or many, but when the food was before them, it seemed like at least a week since they had eaten. They did not sing or even speak much for a while, and paid close attention to business. But after a time their hearts and spirits rose high again, and their voices rang out in mirth and laughter. You ever had a meal so good you just decided to, like you had a bite of something and you just did like a little dance or you cried out, just Makes me think of a YouTuber I sometimes watch who goes by the name of Jordan. And you'll know something is good if he puts on his glasses and throws them away. Full force. And you're like, oh yeah, that's a good one. After they had eaten, Goldberry sang many songs for them, songs that began merrily in the hills and fell softly down into silence. And in the silence, they saw in their minds pools and waters wider than any they had known, and looking into them, they saw the sky below them and the stars like jewels in the depths. Then once more, she wished them each a good night and left them by the fireside. But Tom now seemed wide awake and plied them with questions. He appeared already to know much about them and all their families, and indeed to know much of all the history and doings of the Shire, down from days hardly remembered among the hobbits themselves. It no longer surprised them, but he made no secret that he owed his recent knowledge largely to Farmer Maggot, whom he seemed to regard as a person of more importance than they had imagined. There's earth under his old feet, and clay on his fingers, wisdom in his bones, and both his eyes are open, said Tom. It was also clear that Tom had dealings with the elves, and it seemed that in some fashion news had reached him from Gildor concerning the flight of Frodo. Indeed, so much did Tom know, and so cunning was his questioning, that Frodo found himself telling him more about Bilbo and his own hopes and fears than he had told before even to Gandalf. Tom wagged his head up and down, and there was a glint in his eyes when he heard of the riders. "Show me the precious ring," he said suddenly, in the midst of the story. All right, had to refresh that thing really quickly. And Frodo, to his own astonishment, drew out the chain from his pocket and, unfastening the ring, handed it at once to Tom. It seemed to grow larger as it lay for a moment on his big brown-skinned hand. And suddenly he put it to his eye and laughed. For a second, the hobbits had a vision, both comical and alarming, of his bright blue eye gleaming through a circle of gold. Then Tom put the ring round the end of his little finger and held it up to the candlelight. For a moment, the hobbits noticed nothing strange about this. Then